Hello and welcome once more to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today my guest is Ivan Tyrrell. Hi Ivan.
Hello.
And Ivan, along with his colleague Joe Griffin, has written a book here which is quite a tome, I have to say. It's Godhead, the Brain's Big Bang, the Explosive Origin of Creativity, Mysticism and Mental Illness. We got sent this book a few weeks ago, and I can't say I've read the whole book, but I've read the key bits, and it really is, I think, a very important book, and we're very happy that Ivan's able to come along. Also, I want to show a previous book he wrote with Joe Griffin, Human Givens, The New Approach to Emotional Health and Clear Thinking. But we're going to pretty much feature the focus on the Godhead book today. And Ivan very helpfully brought me some notes to help me on my way. And at the end, he's just given me some quotes, which is the one I'm going to read out first, which I really, really like, which is kind of based on the subject of the book. And it's from someone called Jami who lived many hundreds of years ago. And the quote is as follows: "This universe is changed and renewed unceasingly at every moment and at every breath. Every instant, one universe is annihilated and another resembling it is taking its place, and the majority of men do not perceive this." So every moment, the universe is in fact disintegrating and reforming. So that's pretty deep stuff, isn't it, Ivan?
Well, we think it's the oscillation of the universe, and we explain that in a way that scientists enjoy, but also we point out that mystics for hundreds, probably thousands of years, have been entering a state of mind where they actually experience that directly, and then they try and express it in poetry. And of course most people don't understand it because they haven't experienced it. That's what happens. And that's why a chunk of the book is about the sort of evidence that we pull together for the universe working as an oscillation into nothingness and back again into the material world that we're all familiar with.
Yes.
But that's an idea further on, really.
Yes. So I just want to talk very briefly about how you got to be where you are in terms of writing the book. And something happened at 15 years old, wasn't it? It was quite
very
significant.
briefly. I was at school and they introduced a new jumping horse, you know, that you have to leap over.
I remember
in the
jumping
gym.
horse
Yes,
at school.
yes,
Yeah.
I don't know, they probably still do it, but I'm not into sport very much. But being young and fit and a good jumper, I went over it, but I just caught my foot and I smashed this arm up very, very badly. That's why it's a bit mangled. And was rushed off to hospital by a little Scottish gym master called Jock. We called him Jock, I don't know what his real name was, who was white as a sheet when he saw what happened. And I went to see the surgeon straight away in the hospital, and he said, "Can I operate on you using hypnosis? Because the anaesthetist isn't immediately available and I ought to get to work on it." And I agreed. And he said, "Would you like to have your eyes open?"
That was pretty far out at the time.
Well, it was, but we've come across lots of other examples now.
Okay.
But, so I agreed to this. He operated on me, and I had my eyes open because he said you can watch or you can close your eyes. But I chose to watch, being 15. I think I'm too squeamish now to do that. But and then I went back to school a week or two later, with obviously all plastered up and everything, bandaged up, in an arm in a sling. And I was telling my friends about this hypnosis that he'd used, which really did work. And a teacher there sort of virtually called me a liar because he didn't believe in hypnosis, you see, which I was really indignant about. And I went off to the library and got a book out on hypnosis, and really that was the beginning of my interest in psychology. Although I did lots of other things before I settled into that as a sort of a career, and started a college teaching psychotherapy with Joe Griffin.
Yeah, and you also spent some time with Idris Shah, didn't you?
I did. I had a long association with him, doing projects with him and attending his meetings and so on. And I personally regard him as one of the great figures of the 20th century. He introduced so many new ideas from Sufi traditions and also pointed out things that our own psychologists were discovering that people weren't taking much notice of, that has really transformed the thinking of a lot of people.
Yeah. So the book pretty much starts with talking about the brain's Big Bang. So we know about the Big Bang of the universe, but you're saying the brain, the Big Bang.
Well, in a sense, I mean, other people have called it that as well. Roughly 40,000 years ago, 38,000 BC, people suddenly seemed to get incredibly creative suddenly. That's why it's called a Big Bang. There are signs that this sort of proto-creativity before that, as we even see signs of proto-creativity in animals. But suddenly we were producing much more advanced stone tools and bone tools.
This is at Stone Age?
This would be 38,000 years ago, still in the Stone Age.
Yes.
And cave art, you know, or they call cave art, although it probably existed outside of caves as well, but carvings, beautiful paintings and drawings. This suddenly all took off. And what we realised, because of our study of psychology and psychotherapy and so on, and we realised the importance of the REM state. The REM state exists in all animals, all mammals.
So the REM state is something
rapid eye movement state.
Which we experience a lot at night. It's known as something that happens.
Well, it's going on all the time, but it kind of has huge peaks. For example, when we're dreaming, when we're being traumatized, when we're learning something, in mystical experiences, in trance states and so on, you see rapid eye movements. If I was to ask you to remember a really strong emotional memory from the past, you'd go off like that and I'd see rapid eye movements. We've filmed all this, we've got all the evidence for this.
Yeah, because until I read your book, I wasn't aware that REM movements happened outside sleep, so that was new to me. But you were saying that's fairly common knowledge in certain circles.
Yes, you can see it, and we show them on our diploma course. We show people doing that, and so there we are. We've got mammals have evolved. They go into this REM state, and we puzzle out more. Or Joe Griffin really puzzled this out, and because he got interested in why we evolved to dream. It's such a strange thing. Why did we evolve to dream? And he spent 12 years. And suddenly he got the answer. I mean, we go on about that in other books and our teachings and so on. And the answer is that we dream to de-arouse unacted out emotional arousals. So if you have a big argument with somebody, you won't have a dream about that, but you'll have a dream about a resentment that then you wish you had told them what you thought. You'd have a dream about that. Metaphorically, but it won't be the person there, there'll be somebody else standing in for that person in the dream, because everything in a dream is metaphorical, and Joe demonstrated this.
So you're working through something in a way, is that right?
You are.
Clearing it somehow.
Yeah, that's right. So, and I personally think you should do a whole program on dreams, because there hasn't been a good program on television or anywhere about why we evolved to dreams.
That's a commitment, we'll do one, you and I, yeah.
So we got to that, and we thought, well, obviously there's a connection. When people daydream, they go into the REM state, and we suddenly realised, well, of course, if you daydream, you've got a past and future tense, because you're daydreaming about things that had happened or how they could have happened differently, or imagining things, solving problems. And it seems to us sort of undeniable that burst of creativity happened when human beings, or some human beings, were able to enter this sort of internal reality theatre, which, amongst other things, we dream in. And once we'd done that, we had access to a past tense, a future tense. We could solve problems in our mind, which means we have to be a little bit psychotic to do that, because you're imagining things that aren't there. And you also have to be a little bit autistic, because having solved the problem mentally, you've then got to have the determination and the stickability to actually carry it out, you know. So, which is why you see so many examples of psychosis and autism, or slight high levels of autism in people who are creative.
But are you saying that that facility wasn't in man before 40,000 years ago?
No. Yes, we are, basically.
Yes.
Because there's no evidence that the human beings were particularly creative. I mean, they were having a good time, like happy animals, you know, like happy monkeys or something.
Yes.
And they were creative to a certain extent. But the modern tools, the tools they were using, the stone tools, didn't really alter much for the 160 odd thousand years since modern man appeared in Ethiopia.
So it was a real quantum leap in one way.
It's a quantum leap. That's why we call it the Big Bang.
Yes.
And of course, the moment you've got access to daydreaming and you can talk about the past and the future, you start asking questions. And one of the most fundamental questions is, how does this work? You know, what forces are at play to make animals live and die? You start asking questions about people that have died and where have they gone to? You know, one minute they're there and the next minute they're plainly dead. And so the origins of mystical inquiry would have begun about the same time, which is why a lot of cave art appears to be symbolic in some way.
Okay, so how fast did that all then start to move forward? So it happened 40,000 years ago. The way we look back now in history, man was still pretty primitive.
Well,
until relatively.
I think there'd be a few people in that would have accessed that state initially, and of course they would have been perhaps interbreeding with people who hadn't accessed it yet. So it was kind of watered down, but every so often there seems to be a huge sort of upsurge of creativity. And one of the most remarkable things, for example, which we talk about in the book, is a site they've discovered in eastern Turkey. I've just come back from Turkey, called Göbekli Tepe. And that was a site which is more spectacular than Stonehenge, but was built about 12,000 years ago with huge stones, pillars with T's across the top of them, and carvings on them and so on, circle temples. But they were built by people who weren't farmers, who weren't living in towns or cities, which is the opposite of how archaeology assumed history had developed. They were built by hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers have to be inspired to do that. And who would inspire them? It would be remarkable individuals. So we think some remarkable individuals have been around for probably 38,000 years ago.
Okay. So another fundamental thing that you look at in the book, and it was the second suggestion that I asked you, and I like this, the question, what is consciousness?
Well, that's something that's fascinated me since I was a boy, and fascinated Joe Griffin as well, my good friend. He and I puzzled over this for a long time, and were always interested in consciousness. Why is it, we go unconscious when we sleep? Why is it it's so vulnerable to manipulation and influence? But gradually we started to realize that consciousness is really about relationships. And we also realized that there were two types of consciousness in the universe. One we called object consciousness, which is where there's a perfect pattern match. Consciousness is about pattern matching. When the brain knows something, or even when a flower knows how to be itself, there's an object consciousness involved, because the pattern match is perfect for that flower or that stone or that lizard or whatever it is. There's a perfect pattern match. And if there's a perfect pattern match, that object, and you get that in flow as well, when you're in a state of flow, everything's perfect. You don't have self-consciousness, we have object consciousness. So in a sense, everything that exists in the universe has object consciousness. Self-consciousness is when the pattern matches don't work properly. So you become highly self-conscious if you don't know something, and you think you're going to be embarrassed, or if you're trying to learn something new, it could be a sport or a craft or a skill of some sort, a language, whatever. So you're learning something new and you're highly self-conscious, but once you've learned it, it's internalized and you relax about it.
Okay, but you see, I would say that with the flowers, that's a program. It's like it's a DNA, if you like. That's where it comes from the seed, and that's completely programmed to what's going to happen.
Yeah,
okay?
that's right.
And plants can evolve over a long time, but basically, unless we do something as human beings and we try and create a new DNA, if you like, for a plant, it does the same thing. But that's the DNA. But I would say that with human beings, so much of what we do, what you call the object consciousness, is unconscious patterns that we've learned. Isn't necessarily just in our DNA, although that's partly it, but it comes from our experiences in life.
It absolutely does. The way we're trained or conditioned, what we've learned, our experiences and so on. But when you can do something well, and you don't have to think about it, that's a state of object consciousness. And human beings are remarkable and different from plants and the lower animals and the higher animals, in that we have much more self-consciousness. So we are a mixture of object and subjective consciousness, self-consciousness. And that's what makes us different. And it's because of that self-consciousness that we ask questions. When you don't need, if you can drive a car, you don't have to continually say, what do I do next? What do I do next? Should I change the gear now? You just do it.
But because we've learned it, and it's a program.
Learned it. Yeah, you can say it's programmed, but we're trying to understand what consciousness is. Yes. And it is a program. We call it sort of like inner templates that you've learned. Every baby comes into the world with knowledge. It knows how to suckle to get itself fed. It knows how to draw attention to itself. It can swim even, newborn babies can. And for a few months they can swim. And then that swimming template's turned off. Because they've got to learn to walk. So that's why we have to relearn to swim a bit later, for the most part. The reason we can swim is because the DNA also contains fish DNA, going right the way back to how we evolved.
Yeah.
So we're comfortable at that stage. And then nature turns that, it doesn't want us just to exist in the water, so it turns that down while we learn to walk and crawl and walk and do all the other things we do. But you're right, they are sort of patterns and they are programming. But in order to really understand what's going on in consciousness, and also to understand why mystics have always said that the universe is conscious, the universe, in a way, it could be described as one mind, one person, one huge mind, is because of the difference between object consciousness and self-consciousness.
Okay, so self-consciousness, what you're saying is, now the plant, the flower, that's not going to have self-consciousness, is that correct?
It would only have self-consciousness of a sort, of a very limited, primitive sort, if it was suddenly put in a terrible situation where it's either going to die or it's got to adapt quickly. And of course, sadly, flowers don't adapt quickly.
Yes.
So, but they have fitted into niches in the world. Almost everywhere you go, even in the most apparently barren landscape, there's little things living.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It is extraordinary.
Yeah.
So there has been adaptations, and in a sense, that you see, everything has sensate consciousness. Even sensate consciousness. It's a physical. I mean, an amoeba knows that, I've got to move in this direction, because if I move in that direction, I'll be too cold and I'll die. So it's seeking warmth. So that's a sort of consciousness, you see. It's a pattern match to what it needs.
Yes.
And all creatures have that. And they can encode, when they find what they need, gradually they can encode that internally. I mean, the classic example of that is the development of warm-bloodedness. We don't have to lie in the sun to get animated. We generate warm-bloodedness from within. But originally, in the way creatures evolved, that didn't happen. That had to be encoded in our DNA so that we could internally generate heat. That gave us huge advantages. We didn't have to waste so much time being warmed up every day. We were much less vulnerable. We're much more adaptable to different climates and different circumstances, it was very good for survival. But it also meant that we burnt off a lot more energy, and we needed to get energy quickly. So we had to make other adaptations.
So really, evolution is development of our self-consciousness until it becomes object consciousness.
No, the object consciousness is first, yeah. Because
but if something new has happened...
oh, yes, I see what you mean. No, you're absolutely right.
Self-consciousness and evolution.
That's right.
But it moves towards object consciousness.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what is the drive behind the evolution, behind the always renewed self-consciousness?
Well, we think it's to do with what we've called relatons, which comes from the idea of relationships. Every pattern match that happens can only happen because there is a recognition that this relationship can happen. So, for example, H2O, the oxygen and hydrogen, you couldn't predict all the qualities of water, ice and boiling and steam and just what water is normally. You couldn't predict that from there's hydrogen, there's oxygen. None of that could be predicted. But there's knowledge that says there's a relationship possible here. And when that relationship comes together, you have water. And then all the possible manifestations of water. So we said that there must be a form of matter which we call subjective matter. So there's objective matter, but also subjective matter. It may have something to do with dark energy. I mean, because scientists can't find a lot of the matter in the universe, most of it.
Well, this again fascinates me, because we know, and it's also in your book, that we can only actually find, or science can only find 4% of the universe. The other 96% is dark matter or dark energy.
That's right.
So just explain briefly how they got to that conclusion.
Well, they got to it by measuring the forces of gravitational pull, and they could see, well, there's enough to make such and such happen, but something else is happening, and the difference is the dark energy and the dark matter. So it's a question of measuring the forces that are pulling galaxies apart and so on.
And what's the difference between dark energy and dark matter?
I'm not a physicist. You ask a physicist, Ian.
Okay.
We do know it's in the book, but dark matter is, dark energy is energy they can't explain, and dark matter, I mean, they find it difficult. Yeah, it must be the matter that's involved.
Yeah.
And what we've said is that this subjective matter is to do with relationship. So we postulated that our theory is that at the origin of the universe, the Big Bang, which most scientists agree probably happened, all the evidence seems to show there was a Big Bang, but at the same time as the material explosion, every particle of matter that existed then was accompanied by subjective matter, which we call relatons, a relaton piece of it, because and it was, without that the matter would have not been able to form relationships with other types of matter.
So what do you mean related to subject matter? Try and explain that in a more tangible way.
Subject, it's when you have a recognition that you can pattern match to another form of matter, another piece of matter. And when you have that, in the origins of the universe, you get the beginnings of gas clouds, and then gradually solid matter appears, and so on, because the subjective matter, what we call the relatons, and the relaton field contains knowledge of everything it's learned since the Big Bang.
Okay, but where was that knowledge? So it's hard for the ordinary mind to grasp this. So before the Big Bang, what you're saying is the relatons existed, but not in a tangible form. Is that correct? It was almost an energetic
it's
form.
all very difficult to talk about, which is why mystics find these things difficult to talk about, and they write poetry and so on. But you see, you have to look at time. Again, we attempt a new explanation for what's going on with time in the book as well. which is why some people have kindly said it's the first book that really has a genuine theory of everything in it. The mystics talk about the eternal moment. Now, if you just try and grasp what that must mean, is that it means that everything in the past, the present, and the future exists already in that eternal moment. We get a feeling that the universe is moving through a sort of an arrow of time because we're crossing that oscillation of the Godhead state to the God state, or the nothing state to the full total energy state, or the manifestation of all matter. We're crossing that oscillation, and that gives us a feeling. Firstly, it enables us to know the universe, but it also gives us a feeling of movement through time. Physicists say that time doesn't exist. It can't exist. Einstein said it, but lots of other physicists say that it's very confusing for us, because we all know that in one sense time does exist, but from the physics it doesn't. And so there's this difficulty when you start talking about the origins of the universe and what must have happened and what was there before and all the rest of it. It's no good saying, well, there was nothing there before. Well, where did the nothing come from?
Exactly.
You see, it's no good. And it's just equally a cop-out to say, oh, God created it. Okay, who created God? What? That's a cop-out as well. These are God and the Big Bang and so on. They're all holding statements, if you like, for what we don't know. And so when people keep confidently talking about what God does and thinks and all the rest of it, it's just an expression of ignorance, really, because they don't know, and neither did. And if God is everything, He knows about absolutely. If He's, putting a mind into it, He would know about every grain of sand, as poets would say. We are part of that. So, people have been burnt at the stake or stoned to death for saying, I am God. But that is literally true, because we're part of everything. And other people have said that we are the universe looking back at itself. So without the evolution of human beings, or similar creatures, and presumably similar creatures in other parts of the universe, looking back at the universe couldn't make an evolutionary leap itself into understanding more about itself, because otherwise the universe, as all scientists are now, are in the position of the fish in the famous story when the crab tried to explain to them what life on land was like. And he kept on saying, well, when you leave the water, it's light and it's different, it's completely different, there are different animals there. And at the end he said, have you got any more questions? And they said, well, what's water? Yeah. Shah introduced that story into the West, incidentally, Shah. But that is now very often used. That is the position of scientists trying to use the reductionist approach to understand life, consciousness, where it all came from, evolution and so on. They are in the position of fish not understanding what the crab's talking about, because they're in it. You have to step outside it, which is, of course, what some mystics say they've done.
Well, you introduced a lot of things there that are very interesting, and one thing that you mentioned that's also in the book is that the universe needs human beings. I forget your exact words, but it needs us to recognize itself or to expand. It needs our presence as human beings.
That idea we got originally from all the experiments in quantum science. It says you to make matter, photons, for example, initially it was done with, appear in a certain form, you have to have an observer. And there has to be choice. So that's why the symbol on front of the book is from Newgrange. We think illustrates that. You've got the oscillation at the bottom, but you've also got a third bright observer, which we think that's what that symbol's about, and there are lots of other symbols around the world. So that's the observer. So it's a kind of triad. There is an observer manifesting the universe, and the difficulty of the consciousness is your consciousness. We all share consciousness. Everything, we share consciousness, but yours is personal to you and mine is personal to me, and yet we share consciousness.
You see, I would say that the manifestation of consciousness through me is personal, but the actual consciousness, the awareness for all of us is the same. And again, you've hinted at this through you mentioned the interconnectedness of everything.
I think, yes, I think that's true. But without the individual consciousness, you can't look back at the universe, and
Right.
you can't ask the question. You can't ask the questions. I mean, there's a famous quote. I probably won't get it right, but I think it comes from the Quran or somewhere. Which I existed and I wanted to be known, so I created man. This was something of that idea.
Yes.
And what seems to be happening is the nothing that scientists have looked for. They say, well, where is the nothing from which everything comes? It's actually there all the time. And so, okay, where's the energy? How did you get energy? Well, you get energy because this huge relaton field, which is the universe, is constantly pattern matching to itself. And when it does that, it cancels out all energy and you get nothing. So total information and total energy equals nothing. But that's an unstable state, so it constantly manifests again as matter. But it's always changed to the next quantum possibility.
You see, I think it's so important that we kind of forget, as a human race, most of us don't even know, I guess, but that the universe is needing us, from what you're saying, as the observer, and through us observing, we are creating something. And again, we've had a chemist and a couple of physicists on Conscious TV, and they've said roughly the same thing that you're saying, that the observer effect is paramount. And because scientists, the more they go in, I'm looking at my finger, the more they go in, they try and find something, the less likely they are to find something.
Yeah.
And that's the theory of string theory, which is partly debunked, but not completely debunked, that there's not actually anything there. There's a suggestion of something, so something may have been there. And that, as you're saying, and I think is probably true, is connected with the observer effect, insofar as what we're seeing, we're helping to create. And it went further when we had somebody on again talking about how the brain works and how when we look, I'm looking around the room, the studio here, when I look at you, my brain isn't seeing everything that's here, it's seeing bits of it, and then it's putting together a complete picture of what it thinks is in the rest of the space. So that reinforces the fact that we are constantly, as human beings, creating our reality.
That's absolutely right. We have an internal reality generator which is connected to the REM state. And in that we generate our day-to-day reality, and it's a kind of a simple oscillation, and we're doing that all the time. And it's if we're concentrating on something, you just notice that one thing and the room disappears, you know. But other times it can expand out like a great beam of light and take in everything. So that is a fluctuation of attention. Going back to the point you were just saying about the quality of where we put our attention and what we do and the choices we make are very important for our own connection to this universal relaton field. That I'm absolutely certain of, which is why mystics talk about behavior and, trying to do the right thing. Everyone tries to do the right thing, but the problem is no one really knows what's the right thing. You can be kind to people, but that actually is the wrong thing to do in certain circumstances, for example.
Yes, well, it's such a big subject. I know your book, Human Givens, which I haven't actually read, but I've read, I sort of mentioned you also have a magazine that comes out called Human Givens, and I read it, you gave me a couple of issues of that. And that's much more on the human psychology side. But I'm losing my thread now. So what did you just say now? I just lost my thread.
There's another interesting thing here, is we when our brain, our attention is interrupted, it wipes out short-term memory.
That's what happens. Short-term memory went very good.
I've noticed this constantly. And it's absolutely true. And the reason for that, there's a reason for it, which you can go straight back to biology and psychology for, is that if some interruption happens, it might be important. So nature says, right, wipe out what you're just thinking about, forget about that. This interruption might be more important. And you deal with it. And that interruption can be like a loud bang, or someone shouting out a difficult question, or whatever. It can be anything. But it can also be a thought. You know, you can actually disrupt your own memory by suddenly having a strange thought. And then you express it. What was I talking about? Which this is what you've just demonstrated beautifully in. But I do it all the time too.
But what interests me too is, and you've hinted about this with the mystics, they find the state of great peace, of stillness, and I'm not claiming to be a mystic, but I have times, I'm sure you do, we all do, in our own way. We do have stillness. It's not necessarily prevalent in our lives a lot of the time, but it is there sometimes. And in that stillness, somewhere, my feeling is that all knowledge is actually there. Now, it's not there insofar as it's all obviously there, but there's the feeling that whatever is needed in terms of knowledge or whatever is accessible. And I think that's something again that and I know you carry a little bit in the book there, that where there's nothing, everything is as well. And that is a
all
kind
information,
is there, even though there's nothing there, everything is there. And I've heard it called the quantum vacuum by somebody we had on Conscious TV, where it's scientists find the tiniest particle, which isn't the ultimate, the tiniest particle, and it's teeming with information, teeming with energy.
But what we're saying is that when all matter pattern matches together, it cancels itself out, and you've got all knowledge, all information. I mean, where does information come from is a basic problem for scientists and biologists and physicists and so on. Where does the information come from? And the information, they say, well, it must have come from nothing. Well, it does, but not quite in the way that most people assume, that it came from nothing a long time ago or anything like that. It's constantly fluctuating. That's why we talk about the universe is oscillating from the nothing state to the total energy state and back again. But it's happening in an eternal moment, so we can't obviously see it. But the brain, there's something in human beings that can escape time and space and have an experience of that. And some people get little touches of it occasionally, and they're usually called intimations of immortality or something. And but there is a problem, though, with what you said, I think, and that is, people think, well, I've only got to meditate and be peaceful and quiet and do mindfulness and so on, and all will be well, and I will contact this universal relation field or whatever. The thing is, the brain can only operate, and we can only operate, with what templates are inside us. Just as that flower can only be a flower because it's got the genetic templates to be that flower. So it's a question of what you've put in yourself, what experiences you've had, what stories you've absorbed, because stories contain patterns, what information you've internalized. Because you cannot learn something new or experience something new, really, without it connecting up to something you already know. We know this with educating children. To internalize knowledge and then add new knowledge to it is how education and learning works. Which is why, for example, I published thousands of stories, anecdotes, patterns, bits of information and so on for people, and he said, just absorb it, go over it and over it again, study it, think about it, discuss it. Because if you do that sincerely, with sincere questioning, and you leave your ego aside, you then have patterns in you that can connect to something higher eventually, which might take 20 years, but you can do it.
Yes, I remember reading something a few years ago, which is very interesting, about how there was certain native tribes that were discovered in South America, never had contact with anybody of their own tribe, and they were able to see things that we don't see. So, like a bee would buzz across the room, or whatever. It wouldn't be a room in their case, but buzz across the horizon, and they could see the vapor trail from the bee, like we see the plane vapor trail, because I guess that's pattern matching.
Yeah,
for
they've
them.
got a more attuned pattern match
So
to nature.
that's in their reality, that's in their consensus reality, that they can see that. We can't see that. And you wonder how many things that we don't see. Well, I'm sure there's so much in this studio that we don't see, not because that we can't see them, but we haven't developed the ability to see them somehow.
The template's not in us, you see. You have to connect new knowledge and new experiences to existing templates. That's why if something really unexpected happens, we get thrust into a sort of a shocked trance, you know.
Yes.
Like in a car accident or something, and your whole life falls before you because your brain doesn't know what's going to happen next. It's in a state of complete ignorance for a moment.
Yes. Something I want to pull out of my original notes, which if I talk a little bit more about, is you say that relatons maintain pure object consciousness, the I am thatness. And you go on to say, observing consciousness also keeps the Godhead in place, which means there's a trinity involved in maintaining that reality. There's the state of pure I amness, the state of pure energy, and the state of consciousness which holds it together. I thought it was interesting that you found this trinity.
Well, that's again like the cover of the book where we've got that trinity. In a lot of mystical writings, I mean, the famous one, I am that I am. Is I am is the state of all information. All that information manifests as matter and then comes back again. Because every time it manifests, it's slightly different because it manifests to the next possibility and the information has to go back. So, yeah, it is interesting. You're absolutely right. It fascinates me and it fascinates Joe. And
but this state of I amness, this you would see as the state of
the whole universe is the knowledge, the person. See, we would say that was the Godhead. You can, if you want to. When I say we would say, we're just using that word. In a way, I wish we hadn't called the book Godhead, because a lot of people think it's a religious book, and it isn't. It's more science and spirituality.
Yes.
But we use that ancient terminology because mystics have used it. The Godhead is all information, the mind of God, if you like. God is his manifestation, which is everything material. And there's a constant interaction there. And that interaction from the Godhead down to raw energy contains many, many, many layers, levels, millions probably. And when you access another layer, like in a near-death experience, for example, your attachment to and your understanding of the day-to-day material reality we're living in at this moment in this studio changes, and you're outside of time and space in the normal sense. And lots of time can appear to pass by in that state, and then when you come to, no time has passed. Very strange.
Well, I think we all have experiences of time being strange, that's right. Time is stretched sometimes and time goes so fast, that's right. You also say that it's actually human destiny to be the observer that maintains the universe, which gives us as human beings an incredible responsibility, which I'm not sure we're taking very well.
Well, I think there would be some individuals who are doing their best, and there always have been. But you're right, the human race is under pressure. But in evolutionary terms, pressure is what produces the next development. It's environmental stresses, for us now, psychological stresses actually can produce a new type of human being, or if it doesn't, that experiment is wiped out, and maybe the universe has to have another go at it somewhere else.
But why do you think we seem to be making such a bad job of being guardians of, well, it's the guardians of the universe, if this is correct, not even the planet, because if the universe is depending on us as from our observer effect, we're in a way guardians of the universe, and we're making a pretty poor job of it, really.
We are making a poor job of it. I just will say one thing. I've just read a fascinating book, I can't remember the author's name, but it's called The Lucky Planet, or Lucky Planet. And he puts an incredibly good case to say that a planet like ours, which can produce life, it must be incredibly rare, and it might even be unlikely that there's another one anywhere in the universe, in all the other galaxies, because the combination of chance things that had to happen to produce life makes it unlikely. So we think that the universe, the I am part of the universe, the mind of the universe, if you like, where all that information is, squeezed out self-consciousness from object consciousness. And in squeezing it out, that's us. And we can now look back at the universe. And in looking back, we can make choices. Because there's always this, sort of what's in our chemical terms, they used to call it the arc of descent and then the arc of ascent. So there's the ascent is back to the I am state of all knowledge, and the descent is down to raw energy, that kind of oscillation going on. But somewhere there has to be a choice for the ascent, and that has to come from at least one individual trying to force things.
So it's like a leader in a
take
way.
Things back. Yes. But I mean, your other point though, what you were wanting to talk about, because I know this is something that interests you, is what's our society doing? What's wrong with our society? And it is very lopsided and peculiar at the moment. And I know you're interested in this, so you can talk about that for a few minutes probably. In the human givens, we say, well, the human givens come into the world with knowledge. We experience that knowledge as needs, innate needs. We also come into the world with innate resources. And the innate needs are needs for security, for attention, for competence, for feeling competent and achieving things, for status, for connecting to the community, for intimacy. And a big one is a need for meaning, actually having a need for meaning. And most people get their need for meaning by serving other people, like raising a family or teaching, raising children, or working in a team, in a business, or whatever. They get their need through that. Others get it through learning new skills, through sport, arts, etc. And others get it from feeling connected to something bigger than themselves. And it's amongst those people that you will find a small portion of them able to connect to something much larger. So these innate needs have to be met in balance, and the problem is in our society it doesn't meet them in balance. So, for example, it's a golden rule of psychology that emotional arousal makes us stupid. I mean, it's a very simple rule, we can all remember it. But it does, you know. And the emotional arousal, not just things like anger, depression and so on, it can be awe. It can be love, falling in love with somebody can make you stupid. This is why some women marry psychopaths, because they can't see the signs, so they're so blinkered. Oh, they're wonderful, and they marry them and then find that they're, you know, really bad people. So we're lopsided, where we don't get our needs met in a way, and we're not taught about the importance of getting our needs met in a balanced way.
But you see, what I would say there was that on the human givens level of looking at things, you're working pretty much with an object consciousness, insofar as you're working to help find a person have a balanced personality. And it's true, having a balanced personality can help you have a happier life, and in one way we're all striving for that.
Well, things will tend to go better for you,
Yeah, but if we're really going to find peace, freedom or whatever, I would say that it's the self-consciousness, which is not always easy, it is the unknown, is where we're all heading, because just going around in a balanced personality is not going to actually take us to our final destiny.
One of the things is, when you use words like peace, not you but everybody, and freedom and enlightenment and harmony, all those words are abstractions. They're not concrete enough to really work with, but they make people feel good.
But it means something to me, though, you see.
Well, it makes you feel good, but okay, if it means, what does harmony mean to you then?
Did I use the word harmony? I think I used the word free and peace.
It's free and peace.
Free,
yeah.
peace.
Yeah.
It means that I'm moving back, I notice. I live who I really am, which is the awareness that watches everything, which I taste, but is only a taste now and again. Sometimes it lasts longer than other times, but it's the permanence and never changing. It's what's always there. It's behind everything, and everything else is, and that just ties in. When we talked about earlier, it being nothing but everything. It has all knowledge, but it is the peaceful resting place from everything. But everything comes, and I'm just talking about my own experience here, or my own lack of experience, and it always comes back to the same thing. And yes, the balanced personality is so helpful, and it's intelligent to have one in life, but it's not it, is it? Or is it? I'm fine to engage with you. We have about 5 minutes left.
I know, we haven't really talked about this
with this
before, but there are also, people say, we want freedom, or I want to be free. But free to do what? Free to be a psychopath? Free to indulge my every
something
whim?
Completely different, though.
I know, but that's the problem with the word, you see. That's why I'm saying we've got to be more concrete.
Yeah.
Clearly, when students on the street say we want freedom, that's all very well, but actually, what precisely are you talking about? And what we try to do in these books is to make more concrete these kind of abstractions. There's a huge problem for the human race, is that we're innately greedy. We're greedy for attention, we're greedy for food, we're greedy, and all creatures take in stuff from the environment. They eat, basically. They feed. And what we have to do is to organise our thinking so that we just take in what we need. We all need a bit of status. We all need a bit of attention. We all need to feel secure, but we don't want to be so secure that we never go out. We have to take risks. We all need a bit of attention, but we don't need so much attention that we become the centre of attention wherever we go, and we're unhappy if we're not. So attention junkies are a right pain, aren't they? So you need to organise how we get these innate needs met in such a way that we develop spare capacity. And when we have spare capacity, we can then think about the things that you're concerned with, which I know you are, which is how to connect up to something bigger.
Yes.
But if you set a desire, if you say, well, I want happiness, well, that may not be what the plan is for you. But by putting a limitation on it, saying that's what I want, you're closing yourself off. And it's the same, you say, I want peace, I want freedom. You have to be careful you don't close yourself off from something much more important to do with your immortality.
Okay, I think that's a pretty good place to finish.
All right.
I appreciate you very much coming along.
That's my pleasure.
Chatting with me here. I'm going to show the main book we talked about, Godhead, the brain's Big Bang, which is fascinating, and I think if you've watched the whole interview, you'll realise that this is a must purchase, but you need a long holiday to read this and digest it.
Well, don't put them off, it's not that difficult.
Well,
it's just you're reading so many books at the moment, you see.
And then we touched on this book at the end, Human Givens, which is also written with Joe Griffin. And you've written many other books too, haven't you?
We've got a new one out this week, actually. It's just off the press yesterday, and it's called Why We Dream. the definitive answer, and it talks a lot about Joe's discoveries in dreaming.
We're going to have an interview about that because
Right,
that will be interesting. Yes, and you also have a magazine called Human Givens as well.
There's a couple of websites that I mentioned on there.
Yes.
I don't know if they'll.
Yes, I'll put those at the bottom of the interview.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you again, Ivan.
It's all right, my pleasure.
And thank you, everyone out there, once again for watching Conscious TV. And I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.